Welcome to Can I Park Here? Brought to you by findafashiontruck.com. Nashay and Estrell's mission is to inspire future and existing small business owners. They don't claim to be experts. They're simply trying to figure this all out, just like you.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Can I Park Here? Brought to you by findafashiontruck.com. My name is Nashay Snow, and I'm here with
Estrell Riles.
Today, we will be talking to Asia Favors from Favors Law Firm in Chicago.
You know, it's cool that both Nashay and I already know Asia. We went to high school with her years and years ago. I'm not going to put a number on it, though, because that might make us seem old, and we're really not.
That's true.
But anywho, so she will be, she's an attorney, and she will be giving us a little advice on what to do when you're first starting out and the steps to setting up your business legally, how to determine your business structure and how to proceed, with your business plan, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. She first starts out just telling us about how she changed careers after 10 years of being in publishing and seeing that there needs to be a change and decided to make a jump. And I know a lot of fashion truck owners, future and existing, did the same thing where they were in a particular industry and really wanted either the freedom to do something different or the love for fashion and decided to take that risk. So we think you'll find this very inspiring, but we won't waste another minute and start it now. Here we go.
Welcome to today's episode of the Can I Park Here podcast. I am Estrell Riles, and I'm here with
Nashay Snow. Today
we'll be interviewing Asia Favors. She is an attorney at Favors Law. Hi, Asia. How are you?
I'm very well, Estrell. Thanks so much for asking.
We want to start off the interview just by you telling us the story behind your business and how you became a lawyer.
Well, it was always my dream to become a lawyer as a kid. I did a few things before that, quite a few things, as a matter of fact. I obviously went to undergrad, got a master's degree in theology. We'll talk about it later. I know you're like, how does that work together? It makes sense. We'll talk about it later, though. And spent about 10 or 11 years in the publishing industry. Right around the recession, the publishing industry kind of took a dive. People were questioning the longevity of the industry because everything was going digital. And I figured, hey, I could take that ride with the publishing industry and become a techie, or I could live out my dream and become a lawyer. So I quit my job, went to law school, and now I'm a lawyer.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, in the publishing industry, what were you doing there?
I was working for it's the nation's largest independent Christian African-American publishing company. So they have a niche market that's pretty solid in terms of what they offer to churches and religious institutions and things of that nature. They've been around 40 plus years. So I did a lot of editing Bible, Sunday school, vacation Bible school, that kind of thing. See, I told you the theology degree would make sense at some point. So now it makes sense, right?
No, that's awesome. Even though I know we have you on here to primarily talk about, your journey to becoming a lawyer and then also to give people some tips, but I'm just curious, and maybe you have them or not, because I know you're not really in that industry, but if there are people out there looking to publish maybe an ebook or anything like that, do you have any tips for them?
I actually think an ebook is the way to go now. There are people who are still self-publishing and printing, and to self-publish and actually print a book would cost you a considerable amount of money because you have to pay for the printing. Whereas with an ebook, you can kind of get that thing done online or have a graphic artist, which is something that I'm sure one of you could speak to, lay it out and kind of design it. And you have an ebook for a lot less money than you would have an actual paper book that you had to have printed and then you have to store and then you have to figure out how to sell. So it's a little bit easier financially to start out with an ebook. So I think that's an an excellent way to go. And the process is very similar, though. You would, sit down, figure out what you want to write about, get it edited, have a good designer lay it out. You may or may not want to have a cover that would be used on that electronic format, whatever, EPUB or whatever they're using now, Mobi or EPUB, and have your book laid out that way. I think that's a really good way to get started. Some people actually do that, do something smaller, and they give it away for free. And I'm in favor of that. I actually, one of my favorite cupcake shops became my favorite shop because I was walking down the street and they were giving out free cupcakes. So it's a good way to get your name out there. I'm not kidding. It's a good way to get your name out there. And, for people to know who you are is to sometimes give things away for free. So if you could do something small like that, maybe about your fashion truck or about whatever you're interested in, people, may grab hold of that and start to seek you out.
So you mentioned how you kind of saw that the publishing industry was starting to struggle, and so you decided to pursue your dreams of becoming a lawyer. What kind of hurdles did you have to overcome to get where you are now?
Oh my gosh. How much time? How long is the podcast? I think in general, when you set out to kind of accomplish what you've dreamed about accomplishing, there are obstacles inherent in that path. I, for one, saw the money as a barrier. Law school is very expensive. And I was told by some pretty important people, much smarter than myself, don't do it. The general consensus was like, don't do it. Law school is very expensive. It's really hard. And the market is kind of iffy right now for lawyers. This is not something that, you want to undertake at this particular time in your life. And I took that advice. I took it in and weighed it out. And I thought, listen, you could be 40 with a law degree or you could be 40 without one. And at the end of the day, there are lots of ways to use a law degree. So I kind of, weighed my options, I guess, which is what you would do with any big decision, any big undertaking, starting a business, starting a fashion truck or fashion line. I mean, there are, pros and cons to everything. So I had to kind of weigh that stuff out, get past how difficult school was, get past how expensive it was going to be, get past how in the world am I going to pay for it. I was out in the world actually working, and so I had to get past, okay, how are you going to pay for your life if you quit your job and go to law school? So those are all things that, felt like barriers to me at the time. And in hindsight, they were minor obstacles. Took a little bit of adjusting and kind of thinking things through, but was able to get it done. So grateful for that.
And I applaud you for taking that risk. And I couldn't do it. Like, I would be too afraid.
I get it. And for sure there were reasons not to, for sure. But you know what? I think if it had just been something that I was thinking, hey, I could go to law school, as opposed to it being something that I knew I wanted to do, I probably would not have done it. So I think that was the deciding factor for me. Knowing that it was something that I really wanted to do, and it was something that I had wanted to do for a long time. I can remember being a kid, watching Judge Wapner on TV going, I want to be a lawyer.
You went way back.
Right. So, pre-Judge Judy days, I was like, hey, I want to be a lawyer. So I knew it was something I really wanted to do.
And now, you ventured out to start your own law firm. Yes. And with that, what's like the most important skill or the talent that's required to be a successful entrepreneur?
Flexibility, for sure. I graduated from law school with some kind of lofty expectations about the kinds of law I wanted to practice and what I really wanted to do. And I got out, and after passing the bar, I realized that you have to have people to teach you, you have to have people to train you, and you have to be flexible in what you're willing to do, because it is sometimes difficult to break into a field or an industry if you don't have somebody who's already in it to teach you, the pitfalls and to train you and to show you the ropes and that kind of thing. In the law, there's something that people sometimes call unconscious incompetence. It means you don't know what you don't know. And we are held to an ethical standard that requires you to be competent when you're representing a client. And if you're incompetent, you think you know what's going on and you don't know that you don't know everything that's going on. You could, quite frankly, no longer be a lawyer. So, there has to be a lot of flexibility and the willingness to kind of be trained and to keep reading and to keep learning. You finish law school and the bar and that kind of thing, and you're like, hey, that was a lot of work, certainly a lot of reading, and then you realize that the work hasn't stopped. So I definitely say the flexibility, the willingness to be trained, the understanding that you're always learning, always reading, always brushing up on something. And I'm for sure that's the case with fashion because things are changing so rapidly. It's like, someone like me, I can't keep up. I go to my closet and I go, should I wear this or should I not? I have no idea.
Yeah, even with like Nisha and I, with our business, we have to be flexible as well because we could, map something out, plan and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. And then we can realize, hey, you know what? This might actually, it might not work. So we need to switch it up a little bit so that we can cater to who we are trying to target.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, flexibility is key.
As far as like from a legal standpoint, what are like the overall steps someone should take when starting a business, like things that they should think about and take care of immediately?
In terms of immediate needs, I would absolutely say a business plan, some sort of approach to marketing, weighing out the cost and where the money's going to come from. If you have the funds, if you need to seek out the funds, if you need to take out a loan, those are all very important things. It's tough to get started and realize that you can't go any further because you don't have the funding to go any further. We all hear stories about folks who started $1,000 and launch a multi-billion-dollar company like those guys on Shark Tank. It's very difficult to do. So I would certainly advise people to weigh the pros and the cons of getting started, look at what it's going to cost them financially to see if it's something that they can sustain with the resources that they have. By all means, I'm in favor of people getting out there, taking a little bit of a risk. By and large, lawyers prefer for people not to take so many risks. But I'm in favor of people getting out there, taking a risk, trying something, trying to live out their dream, starting a business. I'm for sure in favor of that. But you have to map it out. You have to have a roadmap. You have to have a plan. You have to have an idea of what it's going to cost, what the pros or the cons are to entering that particular market, who your competition is going to be. Those are all things that you'd want to consider before entering the market. Everybody wants to take a risk. Lots of people want to be entrepreneurs. It's the smart people in the room who actually plan it out and figure out if it's something they should be doing. If there are any competitors out there that, are so large that they would consume your business. All of those things have to be considered beforehand, before you actually even form the business.
Can you talk about the business structures that are currently available for businesses and maybe provide a simplified summary for each structure?
Sure. So there are lots of different sort of entities out there in terms of business structure. There's a sole proprietorship, which is lawyers usually don't advise that. It's when an individual just kind of strikes out on his or her own and sets up a business. It puts people in a position, though, where they're using their own assets and they're also liable for any of the business's debts. So it's a structure where you don't have any insurance, so to speak, that if things were to go awry, or if the company was to start losing money, or if there was some accident and you were to be sued, things like that, you don't have any assurances that your personal assets would not be involved in a lawsuit, or that you wouldn't be personally liable for the business's debts. So there are some instances where, the sole proprietorship is the preferred option. I tend to advise against it for those reasons. The liability is tremendous for people who have certain types of assets.
It's the cheaper option too, right?
It's the absolute cheaper option because there is no, there's really no paperwork involved. You can just gotta strike out on your own and go, hey, I'm doing some business here. It's me. It's just me. So for sure, that's the cheaper option. And similarly, people do what's called a general partnership, which people sometimes form without even realizing that they formed it. You kind of partner up with somebody and you go, hey, we're partners, let's do business together. And you, again, have the issue of having your personal assets possibly at risk for the business's debts and things like that. That's something that I typically advise against as well, depending on what kind of business you have and what the structure is and what the likelihood is that you could be liable for things that the business takes on. So that's another structure where you could be personally liable. So I tend to advise people either go, depending on the size of the business and depending on what you're trying to accomplish, LLC, which people often refer to as kind of a hybrid structure, may be the best route. You end up with the assurances that you're not going to be personally liable for the business's debt. So a lot of people feel like it's kind of a hybrid entity between a corporation and a partnership. But the great benefit is that you're not personally liable for debts of the LLC. So that's a huge plus. Some people, it's a barrier for some people because the LLC structure, depending on where you are, tends to be more expensive to set up. But it's recommended, to pay that, the few $100 on the front end as opposed to possibly being liable for the debts of your business on the back end. Nowadays, people tend to stray away from the corporation in large part because of something that people call double taxation. So what could happen with a corporation is the corporation itself could be taxed by the government. And then once you take a salary, your salary is taxed. So that makes it a lot more, difficult for some people in terms of the double taxation. To kind of loop back with the LLC, you generally don't have that issue with the double taxation. So what the LLC makes obviously is taxed or whatever, and it's kind of treated like pass-through income. So you don't have the issue of like with the corporation where you have to pay tax. The company itself has to pay taxes, and then you, the individual, are paying taxes on what you make, or the shareholder is paying capital gains tax. So, and in a, business like a fashion truck and so on and so forth, the LLC may be a viable option. I certainly would advise people to seek out legal counsel in their area because these things kind of vary from state to state about what structure would be the best structure for their business.
And even if it's a group of people, can you still do an LLC, or does it have to be a partnership?
No, you could definitely do it with a group of people. They're called members in an LLC. Those folks are called members, and those members can also participate depending on how you set it up in the management of the business. But for sure, you can have more than just two people working within an LLC.
And another thing I think that baffles people a little bit too is like, what is a tax ID number? Do you have to have it if you are an LLC, and why is it important?
So here's the thing. Number one thing I tell people about tax IDs is if anybody is trying to charge you for one, don't do it. You can go to the IRS's website and get a tax ID number, and the IRS doesn't charge you for that. So in essence, a tax ID number is sort of the business's social security number, to kind of put it in more of a simplified term. It's the way the business is identified. It's what the IRS uses to identify the business and how you pay the business's taxes and so forth. Depending upon the structure of the LLC, the way that it's taxed could be in a way where you don't necessarily have to have the tax ID. Again, that's something, because those things vary from state to state, is something you should for sure check with a lawyer about. But I always advise people to have a tax ID number because, for one thing, you don't want to function in a way where you aren't paying your taxes if you're liable for taxes. That's a good way to get shut down. It's a good way to incur a lot of fees for back taxes and penalties and things like that. And rest assured, the IRS will get their money. So you want to have a tax ID. You'll want to have your business legally set up, properly, so that everybody's, functioning in a way that keeps them out of trouble. So
yeah, and actually the tax ID number is kind of important too, especially when you go to a bank to open up a business account. They're going to require that.
They absolutely require it, and especially a lot with retailers. It's something that you're going to need if you're buying at wholesale. I would absolutely recommend that once you set up the appropriate structure for your business, that you do get the tax ID. There's really kind of no way around it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What is the difference between a TIN and an EIN?
Well, first, I would always recommend that people visit irs.gov. That's the IRS's website. And any questions that you have about your business's tax identification numbers, things of that nature, could always be answered on irs.gov. It's very user-friendly. So the IRS defines a taxpayer identification number. That's a TIN. It's just an identification number that the IRS will use in the administration of the tax law. So it's the number that you would use when you file your taxes. And on that basis, the taxpayer identification number and the EIN are interchangeable. They're one and the same. So an EIN is what an employer identification number. That is also called a TIN, which is a taxpayer identification number. And it's used to identify the business entity. So you can use employer identification numbers or taxpayer identification numbers when the business files its taxes. It's also a way that the IRS acknowledges that the business has paid the taxes for those employees that it has and things of that nature. So a business will have an EIN, and that EIN would be considered its taxpayer identification number.
And I think another question that might be helpful to our listeners is trademarking your business name important? Because I've heard like a couple different theories. Like some people are like, okay, if you're just starting out, don't worry about it. And then if you start to get become a bigger business, then worry about it and pay the money to do it. Or if you have a really unique name, should you just go ahead and pay several $100s in order to get it trademarked?
I think I'm of the school of thought that newer businesses, smaller businesses, don't have to incur that expense right away. So you can, for instance, name your business whatever fashion, right? That's the name of the business. And you can put the little TM symbol next to it and just kind of notify people like, hey, this belongs to us, right? Where when you see, for instance, the Target symbol and you see like the R with the circle around it, that mark means that it's a registered trademark, which means that they've paid that extra money to actually have that mark registered with the government or that name registered with the government. So it's not something that I would spend the money on right away. For sure, as people start to grow and become more recognized, it may be something that they want to consider paying the money to do. It's similar with copyright. You just put the little C in the circle around it, the date next to whatever you're trying to copyright, whatever, written document you're trying to copyright. And that just kind of puts people on notice that copyright belongs to you. It's not something that you necessarily had to register with the government. Obviously there are big companies out there that have a huge interest in protecting their name and protecting their brand. And they for sure have had their name or their mark registered. But it's not something that I would worry about early on in the business. If you're serious about it, just put the little TM next to it and just kind of puts people on notice that, this belongs to us.
I'm about to start putting that on everything.
Well, the question, so how about, let's say if, you start out small and you're like, whatever, boutique, that's the name of the company. And then you do start to get a little bit big and there is someone else out there with a similar name. Do you have like anything to stand on? Like when you try to register it, like let's say if they beat you to like putting in a trademark application first, or is it kind of like the luck of the draw? Like you're hoping that the TM will work and you're hoping nobody else will like infringe on your name or try to challenge you later?
Sure, you could get into a situation like that. It's likely that the test, if you do get into a situation like that, will be who put the mark or the name into commerce first. So it's just a matter of who can prove that they first used it in the course of business, right? So it's not one of those things that for the small guys happens a lot, but it could happen. For sure, it could happen. So if you have the money and you feel very strongly about it, for sure you could have someone register it for you or register the trademark. But starting out and being small and that kind of thing, and certainly do your due diligence, right? Certainly. Kind of do some research and make sure that your name is not being used elsewhere or that something similar is not out there already, and for that reason that you could be infringing on somebody else's trademark, right? So maybe there is a company out there that already has a registered trademark and you don't want to be guilty of something that is called like market confusion, where your mark or your name is so similar to theirs and your business is so similar that there could be some confusion in the marketplace regarding who's who. So
I also wanted to ask, what scenario is a doing business as name require? Is that affiliated with like a sole prop or is that something different?
So they call them DBAs for short. DBAs are, let's say whatever fashion is doing business in Illinois and they're an LLC or a corporation. If, for instance, they started using the name Whatevs Fashion, right? Mm-hmm. They would want to register a DBA because they're also doing business under Whatevs Fashion as opposed to just whatever fashion. So in that instance, a DBA would be a good idea.
And also for us, because there might be some confusion from a few people, can you kind of explain the difference between like federal and state licensing and permits that are sometimes required for businesses?
So in the fashion industry, the only thing I can think of that would be that would fall more on the federal side. Obviously, the intellectual property stuff is considered federal, but there's no particular licensing that you have to have in order to claim your intellectual property rights through trademark or through copyright, right? So that is the trademark and the copyright law is considered federal law. However, the day-to-day aspects of what happens within the business is governed by state law. So you would have, and perhaps whatever law your municipality or village or city would impose on your business. So you would want to look into making sure you have the appropriate business licenses to operate in your city or your village or municipality. You would also want to make sure that whatever your state requires in terms of taxation, you've also registered with the Internal Revenue Service for your state to make sure that you're covering yourself in terms of what the state requires. And again, those are things that vary from city to city and from state to state. So you would definitely want to do your homework on what licenses your state requires, your city requires, and you would also want to look into, for instance, in Illinois, we have something called the Illinois Division of Professional and Financial Regulation or something along those lines. Some businesses require that you have some sort of professional licensing to operate. So you would want to make sure that your city or your state doesn't require a certain sort of professional license to operate in whatever your chosen area of business is. As it pertains to fashion in particular, from a global standpoint, you'd likely want to look into issues to do with international trade. If you are involved in that way where you're wholesaling or purchasing or buying things from overseas, you would certainly want to make sure that whatever business or broker you're working with has, taken heed to whatever regulations he or she should be abiding by as well.
Quick question. A lot of people use LegalZoom to set up their business. Do you recommend that? Like, is there anything like iffy about LegalZoom, or is it like something that is reliable and people should use?
You know what? I don't know enough about LegalZoom to really say one way or the other, except to say this. Sometimes it pays to actually sit down with a lawyer and kind of talk through your idea or your niche or your business. Because what happens when you actually sit down and talk to a live person is this. For instance, I'll have someone come in and see me, and I don't have them fill out we call them intake forms. They're forms that kind of say who the person is and, why they're here and how you're helping them. They could say something during the intake process that prompts me to ask another question. And that question could prompt me to ask a different question. And those things kind of taken as a whole could kind of shape what we decide to do or what advice I give them or what I would recommend for them. As I understand LegalZoom, it's kind of one of those situations where you have to go in knowing what you're trying to do. And that's what you're going to do. Those are the results you're going to get. It's kind of like popping a coin into a gumball machine and a gumball comes out, right? So if you go to LegalZoom and you want to set up a corporation, they're going to take whatever information you're giving them and a corporation is going to be popped out, right? That's what they're going to give you.
Whether or not you know what you're doing or not.
Exactly. So again, like I don't know enough about LegalZoom to say one way or the other. I have nothing against LegalZoom. I do believe that there is something to be said for actually physically engaging with or in conversation with an attorney who can then tell you, well, that may not be what you want to do. You might want to try this. Or I've had clients who've done it this way before and this works better. It's like actually having a conversation as opposed to kind of sitting in front of a computer,
What tips or advice do you have for aspiring small business owners? Do you have any words of wisdom you want to share?
Wow. Words of wisdom. I don't know, but information that I could share from one entrepreneur or one business owner to another is that you have to be on top of the regulatory requirements for your business. You have to be, and by that I mean, for instance, I'll use the food truck situation in Chicago. There's lots of red tape. There are lots of regulatory requirements as it pertains to actually operating a food truck in the city of Chicago. And you can only be within so many feet of a real restaurant and those kinds of things. Stay on top of that because there are things that you're going to be expected to know whether you know them or not, right? The other thing I would recommend is to keep a keen eye on the finances. Know in advance what structure you're going to use to bring money in, to send money out, what your invoicing mechanisms are going to be, how much whatever bank or whatever entity you're going to use to collect the funds. For instance, if somebody's going to swipe a card and pay you, you'll want to know in advance, okay, the bank is going to take 3.5% of what I'm making because I allowed somebody to use an American Express card or whatever, what have you. So you want to keep a good eye on the bottom line, especially if you're small and the bottom line is going to be a big deal for you. And obviously, you know, if you're big, the bottom line is still going to be a big deal. But when you're smaller and these little expenses and little things keep coming out of the business, it could be a headache if you're not anticipating what those things are going to be. I would also recommend that people kind of get out and about and network and talk to people who may be doing what they want to do, just to make sure that you're on the right track and this is actually something you want to do. Once people get talking, you might figure out that this, you know, isn't something that you're cut out for, something that you actually want to undertake because of how difficult it can be. You know, I know people who own boutiques, for instance, and they will tell you, you have to, you know, be able to understand how to get the inventory exactly right. If you have 32 of this particular dress and 2 of this particular skirt and, you know, people want the skirt over the dress, it's like, okay, I don't have enough of this. Now I have too much of that. So I think inventory is sort of a big deal. And I don't claim to be an expert in retail, but I think kind of understanding inventory and what you need to have and what you know, obviously, you know, want to keep in stock and that sort of thing based on the flow of your customer base is something that's pretty important as well. Again, I think on the front end, people should examine how they intend to grow, what they intend to do day 1, what their plan is day 5. And for some people, it will be important to have what's called an exit strategy. You know, there are people who know that their business is not a business that's going to be around in 30 years. So they will want to, you know, kind of have a plan for when they plan to leave the market and how they plan to do that and what's going to be a good time for them. So I think all of those things are important and kind of lend themselves to, again, a person being committed to research and committed to reading and committed to staying abreast of the trends and the regulations and laws that kind of govern their area of business.
Oh, great advice. And before we kind of wrap up, we just want to allow our audience to get to know you a little bit better. So here's a few random questions for you.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite podcast or blog? And if so, what is it?
You know what? I'm not big on the podcast scene, but I like Joseph. What is his last name? Is it Clough? Yeah, Clough, Joseph. And he does like a little bit of coaching, some kind of motivational thing sometimes. He does a little bit of hypnosis if people are into that. But he's overall, he's like a very positive kind of inspirational, you know, podcast. He's not like, you know, weird, like out in the stratosphere and talking about metaphysical concepts that people don't understand. He's, you know, I when I first started listening to podcasts, he's the person I started listening to. And whenever I have the time, I still do. But like he does things, you know, about flexibility, about bringing your dreams to reality. He's kind of a Tony Robbins type, I guess.
And then speaking of being busy, like what do you do in your free time just to like de-stress?
Especially with having the baby.
What is free time? Somebody please explain to me what free time is. You know what? Honestly, I don't have a lot of free time because I've sort of committed myself to being available for my son while he's small to the degree that I can. So my free time is time that I'm spending with my family so that I feel like I'm present We are fortunate in that our son doesn't have to go to strangers during the day. Our parents care for him and, look out for him during the day, which means that he's spending the vast majority of his awake hours still, away from his parents. So my free time is just time that I'd like to spend with him, figuring out, like, he's growing so fast and he's like developing his own little personality. So I'm spending my free time trying to understand baby talk and what it means. And, when he does this, it means this. And this frustration he gets because he's saying this and you don't understand what he's saying. It's like I'm trying to, trying to wrap my mind around those things. So that's how I'd like to spend my free time. And it's a gift, honestly.
And Android or iPhone, and what's your favorite app?
So here, I am caught between. So like I'm an iPhone user, right? Mm-hmm. I have the MacBook Air thing. I have an iPad. The screen is broken. It's been broken for about 2 years. I haven't gotten it fixed, but okay. But here's my problem. I would like to try the Droid, right?
Oh, okay.
Except,
wow.
Like, I feel like iPhone has me over a barrel because, like, if I switch, I'm like, are my contacts gonna switch over? I have like 2 million pictures of my kid on this phone. Like, I could download them to my computer, but like, so I'm like confused about like if I switch to a Droid, like if I'm gonna have the same, like, am I gonna have to physically sit there and put in 350 contacts, or like, how does that work? I don't know. And I'm almost afraid to try, so I'm going to have to talk to some people smarter than me and figure it out. What do you guys think?
I just shed like a little bit of a tear.
Did you?
As soon as I heard you say Android. No, I'm an iPhone.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm diehard iPhone.
She's in the Apple Mafia.
That is so funny. Okay, Strel, are you using a Droid or an iPhone?
Okay, first of all, iPhone all day.
So she's gonna say I'm part of the mafia, and like she's part of the mafia.
You guys are no help. My husband switched to a Droid like a couple months ago, and it was like the saddest thing ever in my house. He was like, "I may have to switch back. I don't know if I like this. This is my and like when people will respond to a group like text message that he had started on his iPhone, like they were trying to reach him and he couldn't get the message on his Droid because it started out in an iPhone like thread or whatever. So like he couldn't get and he's like, people are texting me and I can't get my messages. And
he's an outcast. He's an outcast now. Tell him he should have never left the pack. This is what happens. This is what happens.
So that's kind of what sealed it for me. I was like, well, if I'm changing, I'm not changing right now. Because my life is too complicated.
In the fall, you should just upgrade everything. Go to the 6 Plus or whatever they end up having now. Go with the phablet. Get a new tablet and just call it a day. Don't even go.
I can't even get that thing in my pocket. What am I going to do with that?
Let me tell you, it will change your life. It will change your
life.
Wow.
I thought it was, and I actually used to make fun of Android users. Like, what is this? Like, why is your phone so big?
Why is your phone so big?
But after I got it, when it's like, it's easier on my eyes. I can see more information. So now when I have to like use my husband's phone, which he has the 6, I'm like, this is so tiny. Like I can't even type anything. Like I feel like my fingers are too big for this phone. I don't even know how you're using this.
I can't bring myself to get the phablet. It's just too big. I'm like, how am I supposed to get this in my pocket? And everybody's like, you can fit in your pocket. Well, I could fit my laptop in my pocket too, except I don't want to, right? I don't want to have pockets big enough to fit my laptop. So what? I think the phablet is like out of my league, but I will I'm still like in the 5 family. So I will like upgrade, I guess. Once they pull the 7 out, this Christmas or whatever.
Right. So I'm just saying, team iPhone right here. Team iPhone.
Yeah. I'm in the pack.
And then, and lastly, like, if people have additional questions, where can they find you? Can you give people your website, any social media accounts, and that, the handles to your social media accounts and anything else that you think might be relevant?
Sure. My website is favorslaw.com, Favors law.com. My Twitter is at AM Favors, A like Apple, M like Mary, Favors. My email address is A like Apple, M like Mary, Favors at favorslaw.com. So any of those tools can be used to reach out to me.
Do you have a Facebook page?
I do. It is Favors Law. So it's facebook.com/Favors Law.
Thanks for coming on, Asia. It's been a pleasure.
You guys are the best. Thanks. Take care.
Wow, I think that interview was extremely informative. I hope it helps a lot of people out there, because I know I even get confused with some of that information.
Yeah, and it's difficult to decide when you're first starting out, like how you want to set up the structure of the business. Like, if you're by yourself, do you really want to go as a sole prop, or should you just spend that extra money and do the LLC? But I guess at the end of the day, it's really up to that individual person and their business, whatever it is, in order for them to decide how to proceed.
Yeah, I know. Because even in different business ventures, I've gone either way, depending. And like somebody who's starting off selling crafts might not want to do a LLC, but then after they start selling in the thousands of whatever their products, then they're like, okay, now it's time for me to incorporate. So I guess it's just figuring out like what's right for you. But I would think with the truck, you definitely, not giving solid legal advice here, because I'm not a lawyer, people. So see a lawyer.
Yeah, she really isn't.
I'm not, but I would want some type of protection, because you have people coming in and out of a truck. I mean, of course, insurance is for that too, but you do want to be kind of incorporated just in case somebody does try to sue you, and you don't want them to be able to take your home or your assets. So I think if you're starting any business, it's important to talk to someone.
But we hope you enjoyed the interview. Don't forget to check out Asia on her social media accounts and on her website. If you're in the Chicago area, feel free to reach out to her, and, if you need any legal advice.
And check us out. Just look up Find a Fashion Truck on any of the social media accounts, and you will find us. And then if you have any questions that maybe you would like us to answer, or maybe even Asia to answer, please go to our blog and home of Can I Park Here at startafashiontruck.com. Type in Asia, AJA, and her show notes will come right up. Thanks again.
Bye. Thanks for parking here.